Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, iPhone 6s rumors have begun. IP licensing. ASUS brings a sweet FreeSync monitor. Intel's Kaby Lake rumor or hoax, and just how loud is the pump on the AMD Fury X? All that and more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 322, recorded July 2nd, 2015. iPhone 6s and Fury X Whine.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Get $25 off the Ring Video Doorbell when you go to ring.com/twitch. And by Credit Karma. With Credit Karma, you can find out your credit score, get tips and suggestions on managing your credit, and monitor your credit for free. Visit creditkarma.com and don't forget to download their app. Just text TWIT to 89800 to get started right away.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most intelligent, most thoughtful, most informative, and occasionally even the most accurate and conducive discussion of technology and hardware. I don't know what makes it conducive or accurate. Well, accurate's, I guess, pretty easy, but conducive.
We try, at least.
We try to be conducive.
At least if you put the modifier of occasional, I'm confident that we can say we are occasionally accurate, if nothing else.
Oh, conducive, making a certain situation or outcome likely or possible. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think we're very conducive. Oh my goodness. I'm in technology hell day today. I don't know if it's I should tweet about this, but you saw my glorious 3D printing fail from earlier.
I did, yeah. This is what happens when a 3D printer attached to a Windows machine reboots while the printing is happening. Is that what's right?
Actually, nothing's rebooted on that. That's supposed to be a 20mm cube.
That is not a cube, sir.
Not even remotely close to a cube.
No.
Although it is a wonderful sort of interpretation of sort of airflow in a major cyclonic.
You could probably enter it into a modern art museum exhibit.
That's how I finally got into the MoMA. My childhood dream finally met. Yeah, we'll talk about 3D printers another time because I was talking about them on Tech Thing this week, where it's, there's a reason why all of these 3D printing services are going to do really well, because 3D printing is hard, even when everything works the way it's supposed to. The not so hard is the idea that there's going to be an iPhone 6s. That's kind of obvious. That's the way Apple does things. And it's been interesting to watch 95 Max been all over it. At least that's where I've been picking up all of the exciting iPhone 6s rumors. Double LTE speeds, run more efficiently with new Qualcomm chip. Essentially a new Qualcomm chip that showed up, it was introduced in 2013, showed up in the Galaxy S5, is finally showing up in the new phones. They're claiming double the potential throughput on LTE, 4G LTE. Boy, it's just like technology was a thing that I did for a living. So category 6 cellular modems, 9x35, Gobi 9x35, quote, will allow customers to enjoy blazing fast downloads, snappier application performance due to lower network response time, and run more connectivity-based applications smoothly as well as concurrently. So basically, it supports all the older cell phone technologies that we still care about, plus the new ones. I thought it was interesting that they're basically talking about throughputs that just about nobody supports as a mobile carrier.
Correct. I was going to point that out. Like these LTE modems have these humongous throughput capabilities, which is good. You want to see that. You may want to make sure that there are fewer bottlenecks in any individual location. Yeah. But being able to do 300 megabits LTE is kind of useless in this country at the very least. Right. The lone exception might be in some cases very big campuses like Google's campus or Qualcomm's own campus, for example. They introduce kind of these LTE-powered hotspots that they're using for testing purposes as well, but maybe able to take advantage of some of that additional bandwidth on internal networks. But for 99.99% of the people,
right.
If you can get 50 megabits, that's amazing throughput on a mobile device.
It's going to be interesting. The photos you're looking at right now essentially is saying if there's a different mounting system internally, how the main board kind of attaches to the aluminum frame is going to be a little different in the iPhone 6s. But essentially, size-wise, it hasn't changed. It doesn't look like there will be any. There was rumors of a dual lens camera. Those rumors are pretty much squashed. 905 basically, 905 Mac basically says that this is a pretty reputable source for these photos. They do expect the Force Touch screen technology from the Apple Watch to show up in the phone. They're expecting some power savings. Other than that, not too much to go on. But if you've been thinking about buying an iPhone 6, it's probably time to start waiting for the iPhone 6s. Just saying.
Yeah. Yep.
Just saying.
Yep.
While we're talking mobile, the IP licensing business model, a love story. Somehow, I just don't think it's going to be as full of love and joy as that title might suggest. Alexander Voka. Is it Voika or Voka?
Last night we determined Wojciech.
Wojciech.
But I feel
Alexander
actually really
Wojciech.
bad because I did not specify with him before. I was like, I'm going to have to say this out loud and not just read it or type it. So I should have validated that. But he works at Imagination Technologies, which is a very big player in the IP space, right? The intellectual property space in the mobile world. But it's a company that probably a lot of people haven't heard of. But they develop their primary product is really the GPU technology that is in the iPhones, for example, and in the iPads. Those were based on Imagination core designs. And for many, many years, the Intel Atom processor didn't use Intel's own graphics. They used Imagination's graphics. And in fact, Intel was one of the original, or maybe not original, but was an investor and part owner in Imagination Tech at the time. That's not the case anymore. But it was interesting to see that. And this editorial that he shared with us and let us publish is a look at how the IP licensing business model works, but not from like this kind of stodgy, here's X percentage profit here versus X percentage here versus cutbacks here. It really dives into, what is intellectual property licensing? How does it end up turning into a product, an actual chip that gets manufactured and then put onto a phone and then makes its way into your hand. And it's a pretty compelling process. If you think about it, like a company like NVIDIA and now even AMD, they're technically fabless semiconductor companies, right? So they don't make the chips. They just kind of design the chip and they go to a partner and get them printed out essentially and manufactured and developed. When you're an IP licensor or licensee, you're basically taking IP from all these different companies to make a fabless chip to then make and then produce and sell. So it's like a whole other step removed. And the complication of it and how it all kind of works together is really, really compelling and tells a story of how companies like Qualcomm and ARM and NVIDIA and Imagination all exist in this one ecosystem, kind of creating a family of products to make everything from, my phone to your phone to tablets to smart TVs. All that stuff is based on IP licensing, and it's an interesting to see how revenue changes or how revenue is kind of developed with that based on you might just pay up front or you might pay over the lifespan of the item. You could license just the ability to use one particular set of IP, or you could license the ability to modify that IP to your own, likeness, if you will. It's pretty interesting stuff. If you've never read about it, I would encourage you to go and check it out because it's just, I think you'll feel like you have a better understanding of the entirety of what we talk about when we talk about phones and tablets with this kind of background information in you.
It's a pretty crazy interconnected mess. I mean, well, if you've ever been to a county fair or a state fair, and you go to the Carney section, and sometimes there's this booth, and there's 10,000 strings, and you give the guy $1, and you pull 3 strings. And some of those strings are attached to cool prizes, and that sort of mess of interconnected strings is pretty much the intellectual property around cell phones. Every time an Android device is sold, Microsoft makes money, and that's probably the least complicated aspect of it.
Right.
It's interesting. It's interesting, and it dramatically, profoundly impacts, whether products ship, whether companies get sued, how much products cost. It's cool stuff. It's fascinating.
I mean, think about the modem that we just talked about with the iPhone 6S. Right. That is a piece of IP that Apple might license to include in their SoC to just, and it also kind of explains how we often talk about new ARM CPU architectures.
Right.
Many times 2 to 3 years ahead of when they actually show up in a product. And this is because of ARM develops one product, they package it and say, here's something we're going to license to people. There has to be a buyer that wants it, and then they have to put it in their kind of product schedule. They have to develop it, a product around it, and then they have to build something around it, and then they have to ship something around it. And all that takes a tremendous amount of time and complication to get through. But like I said, still pretty interesting. It's not like stodgy business stuff, like we're not, in terms of business models, but it's actually pretty good. And he does a really good job of explaining how it all works together.
Ladies and gentlemen, inside looks at the hardware industry are something you're probably only going to get at PCPer.com, not your average run-of-the-mill trashy tech site like some of those other ones we won't mention right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
ASUS, that was a compliment, by the way. ASUS MG279Q, 1440p, 27-inch FreeSync monitor, 35 to 90 hertz. Alan wrote this one up. How is he feeling about FreeSync on this monitor?
This, I will say right up front, is probably the first AMD FreeSync monitor that we've been able to recommend to people. For a couple of reasons, a handful of reasons, actually. The build quality of the monitor itself, like the physical characteristics of it, are very good. It's well built, well designed. It's got angle, it's got tilt, it's got rotation. It's not quite as beefy and sturdy as the ASUS ROG Swift, which is one of our favorite G-Sync monitors for a long time. But it's very similar to that in design characteristics. The second reason why we can recommend it is that this is the first FreeSync monitor that we have seen that implements the overdrive capability, if you will, right? The capability for the monitor to adjust brightness levels based on the variable refresh rate of a variable refresh rate monitor, and kind of lessen ghosting that we saw with the very earliest FreeSync monitors. There was tons of that all over the place. The G-Sync monitors have always done a very good job of kind of reducing ghosting based on just kind of algorithmically adjusting the overdrive levels to match whatever frame rate or whatever the frame rate justifies it needs to be. So this ASUS MG279Q does that. It's not as good as what we've seen on the G-Sync displays, but it's way better than anything else we've seen in the FreeSync world. So that's a plus. Also, this monitor is an IPS, like 25 by 14 IPS display. Nice. And so it's got great viewing angles, it's got great color reproduction, and it's a high resolution, right? And it's an interesting combination of all of those things that make this a worthwhile product. Now you'll notice if you look at the box, or look at the specifications, including in that table that he has up on the screen now, it's listed as a 2560 by 1440, 144 hertz display. Now that's true when we talk about it, because if you do not put this monitor in a variable refresh rate mode, it will operate as an IPS 144 hertz 2560 by 1440 monitor. And those are still really rare. I think there might be, the only other one is a G-Sync monitor at this point. But that's something that users might like, regardless of what variable refresh technology they may or may not be interested in. This is a $599 144 hertz IPS display. That's pretty great. However, when you run it in FreeSync mode, people need to understand that you are limiting the maximum refresh rate to 90 hertz. If you want to do variable refresh, the range that ASUS was able to get with this combination of scaler and panel is 35 to 90. So what that means is the maximum, when in FreeSync mode, the maximum refresh rate becomes 90 hertz instead of 144. And if you want to switch back and forth, you can do that, but you have to do it through the on-screen display, and it kind of like resets the monitor real quickly. But it does work to switch back and forth. And then that 35 to 90 range is also interesting on the low end, because 35 frames per second or 35 hertz is also the lowest we have seen a FreeSync monitor actually get to with variable refresh. Right. So again, another difference of FreeSync and G-Sync is when you, on FreeSync, you have a minimum variable refresh rate that when you go below that in terms of what your graphics card is rendering in frame rate, you revert back to either VSync on or VSync off, depending on what you have set in the control panel. So obviously you want that variable refresh rate limit to be as low as possible. On G-Sync, they use an algorithm and a methodology to keep that essentially to 0 or 1 frames per second. FreeSync does not have that, but 35 frames per second minimum is actually pretty good. And you start to get into that realm of, well, if you're frequently going under 35 frames per second, chances are you need to change some of the image quality settings in your game anyway. And that 35 to 90 range is wide enough. It's not, obviously you would like it to be, it'd be great if it were 35 to 144, but for, whatever reason it is, scalar technology or panel technology, they were unable to do that. But the 35 to 90 gives you, I think, in my experience in playing some games on it, especially at 25 by 14, a healthy range of frame rates to target with your games and settings, right? So I played Grand Theft Auto 5 at 25 by 14 at kind of very high-ish settings and on a Fury X, right, one of the new high-end cards, and you're kind of in that 40 to 45 frames per second range, which is kind of right there where it matters the most to have a variable refresh rate monitor. But then you play something like Battlefield 4 and you're going to be more in the 90 range at that point, and so the variable refresh still works as long as you're below 90 and above 35. So it still makes it a little bit more complicated to have to balance stuff in that range, but it's better than the other, like I said, it's better than the other FreeSync monitors we've seen thus far, just in terms of total overall package. Screen quality, variable refresh range, and overdrive capability kind of all add up to make this a pretty good display. And it's $200, $150 to $200 less than the equivalent G-Sync monitor that you can buy today as well. So that helps too.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We should take a moment to thank our first sponsor for this episode of TWiCH. This episode is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. Over 95% actually of home break-ins happen during the day, especially where I live in the quasi-big city, or at least the big city next to the bigger cities. Burglars almost always start by ringing the doorbell just to see if somebody's home before pillaging your possessions, the people at Ring tell us. With a Ring Video Doorbell, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. Ring's advanced motion detection alerts you even if someone doesn't ring the doorbell. It's like caller ID for your home. Installing Ring takes minutes, and it works with either your current wiring or built-in rechargeable battery. Put your mind at ease and protect your home with a video doorbell. Time Magazine named one of the top 10 gadgets of 2014. It's interesting. I know a lot of people who are curious who's at the door. I'm not a huge fan of video camera systems because they tend to not work very well, and they tend to not really do anything other than tell you somebody was in your house. But the idea is the Ring's doorbell monitor, it'll allow you to use your smartphone, because if you got a smartphone, you're online just about everywhere, to see who's at the door. That's pretty cool. So right now you can get the Ring Video Doorbell for only $174. It's $25 off the normal price. Protect your home and have peace of mind with Ring. Go to ring.com/twitch. That's ring.com/twitch. And go get one of Time Magazine's top 10 gadgets for 2014. We want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
Indeed. It's something I'm curious to try out as a person recently re-inclined to worry about security. It's like, okay, that seems easy enough. Maybe I'll give that a shot. I think that's something that's pretty neat. Add one to the office as well as the house, maybe.
Yeah, the big thing around us is kicking in the back door between 9 and 5 of houses where both people work. So they like to make sure nobody's home, though. It's a big one. It gets a little too exciting when somebody's home and they kick the door.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Retail AMD Fury X sound testing, pump whine investigation. If you've ever heard pump whine, Well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's like a fan whine, except it comes from the pump. A pump, of course, being with the liquid cooling. It comes with the glorious AMD Fury X, or 10, as I should be calling it, but I like to say X because X sounds so mysterious, and it's the name of one of my favorite bands. Do you, in fact, hear pump whine in your investigations, Ryan?
Yeah, this is kind of one of those.
I mean,
stories.
Bad, worse than any other liquid cooling system? Or is it just people who've never had a liquid cooling system going, I can hear it, which is unusual for a liquid cooler. Okay.
No, it's worse. I mean, it was when we first got our review sample and plugged it in, a couple weeks ago, it was an immediate like, oh, what is that? And you kind of figure out what it is. And I had done some talking with other reviewers that I knew had the card and said, hey, does yours do this? Does yours do this? Because it's one of those things, a lot of us on the back channels want to say, hey, I want to make sure I'm not the odd man out here saying like that this card has this horrible noise. If everybody else's doesn't, then mine is an outlier and I'll note it in such a way. But in this case, kind of everybody I talked to said, yeah, actually it does have that sound, or yes, it was noticeable immediately and it's horrifying. Those were kind of the range of feedback we got. So we were acquiring a couple of more Fury X cards, like retail cards, in order to do performance testing, like two-way and three-way crossfire. And so it seemed like a good idea to take these other two cards that we bought, they came from Newegg, right? They came from a place where people buy graphics cards from, a lot of them actually, and put them through some kind of like sound testing as well. Are they better? Are they worse? Because originally when we told AMD about this issue, they sent out an email to the media that said essentially, oh no, don't worry about it. We recognize that that's a problem, but we fixed it in production units. That was only the production samples that had that problem. And when you get that kind of answer, you do like I do, and you're like, well, you can't really verify that or claim that it's crap, right? Because I just have to take them at their word. I have no way of judging it yet. So we put that in the story, and we kind of lessened the impact of the pump noise because it's like, well, they say they have it fixed. Well, now we can actually go out and buy units and test them and listen to people on forums and users and YouTube videos that are posting videos of their cards. And a lot of people are seeing the same pump whine from these initial waves of Fury X cards, which is bad, right? Because one, AMD told us that it was fixed, and then two, that's users don't like that. Like clearly we don't have super hearing here. We're not freaks in that way. And other people notice it as well. And we've already heard people like RMAing and returning their cards because they couldn't stand it. And the reason is it's like you can have a fan blower moving a lot of air and it's going to be loud, but the high pitched sounds tend to emanate more, tend to aggravate you more. At least they do to me. And this was one of those types of sounds. It was just kind of a high-pitched squeal that's constant, not changing with gaming load. It's just at idle in Windows, or when you're gaming, you get the same kind of sound reproduced out of it. So the short version is that the two retail cards we got in were actually, they had the same pump whine that the review card that I had in did, but they also were a little bit louder otherwise as well. They had there's like a little bit more buzz in it. The high pitch was there. You could definitely hear it, and you can see it in the sound profile. It shows up in the same location at like 1900 hertz, I guess. But both of them indicated that the problem is wider spread than AMD wanted to believe, and that retail cards are not immune to it. And we know we did some work. Alan, set up the audio recorder, and we tested all three Fury X cards. We tested the Radeon R9 295X2, which is a dual GPU card that has 2 water pumps on it from last generation's cards, and that isn't as loud as the Fury X. And then we tested the 980 Ti under idle and at load. And the standout information from this is that in terms of loudness, as a measurement, loudness, the GTX 980 Ti under gaming load is louder than the AMD Fury X under a gaming load. But it is a very different sound profile. If you scroll down a little bit more into the purple graphs, you'll see a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. Like the AMD Fury X's have this next graph down actually. The AMD Fury X's have like this purple. They have these spikes in the graph that indicate that you are getting peaks at certain frequencies, and thus it breaks up the sound, and those higher pitches will stand out more easily, right? So the cursor right there looking at about 1700 hertz tells you that. And if you go down to the third of those purple graphs, you'll see the 980 Ti under load, right? Which has a blower fan that is not quiet, it's loud, but you see you don't have any of those peaks. You have kind of this consistent decline in sound based on wavelength there. And the result is something closer to white noise than a piercing sound. And I know that people kind of, I don't know, some of the commenters and obviously some of the people who have these cards or want to defend AMD will say that how can you say that you empirically show that the 980 Ti is louder, but then you still say the Fury X is a worse experience. And it's just because of that sound frequency and issue and how it drives you nuts. It reminds me a lot of, and you'll recognize this, I'm sure, like a CRT monitor that somebody left on, but there's no input. Right? It's one of those sounds that you just hear it and you're like, what is that sound? And you kind of have to go hunt around and try to find it. And it's a high pitch, something like that. That is what it reminds me of. So it still doesn't destroy the value of the card of the Fury X, right? I still think it's a good product. But clearly it was disingenuous of AMD to claim that, oh, no, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it, when lots of people are getting these cards and are very worried about it because they see the issue, right?
It's unfortunate.
Doesn't mean it can't be fixed, but
yeah, well, it's just bad. It's bad marketing. It's a bad relationship with the people that are buying your product. To be like, and it's a bad thing to do to editors, or product reviewers.
Right.
That will be fixed when it ships. Then it better be fixed when it ships. I don't know. It's unfortunate that AMD seems to be just enjoying the snot out of setting up a situation where life has become as complicated as possible for them based on their, we're going to take names and kick ass and change the entire retail GPU market as we know it. Well, we've achieved parity. that pump noise, that's fixed when we ship. It wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah. But the good news is, as an update to this story today, there do appear to be newer versions coming out that maybe have the fix in it. So here's the thing. We're seeing pictures of, if you go to that story, like the Cooler Master makes the pump and the water cooling setup for the Fury X. And if you look at that one there, it has kind of like this embossed kind of chromish, metalish, silver logo on it. And that's apparently somebody who opened theirs up that did not have a bunch of not coil wine, but pump wine on it. And if you scroll down to the next picture, you'll see that all three of ours do not have that labeling. They actually have a different Cooler Master logo sticker on the top of them. So all three that we had that had this pump wine have this logo. And some people in different forums are reporting that, hey, I RMA'd it and I got this other one back, or I bought one and I got this one, and it doesn't really have any of that pump wine in there. Now, I've only seen a couple of people actually reporting that, that say they have those products with a different design. But it's possible that this was the fix that AMD was talking about, and that maybe they're starting to kind of come out with a different design that kind of fixes the pump wine. The problem is if you're a buyer, you have no idea which one you're getting. There's no like designation for version 1 or version 2, and there's no guarantee that a card partner is going to RMA a product for you because you say it sounds high pitched. They may just say, well, that's how video cards sound. Sorry, get over it. In my experience, that hasn't been the case so far, but there's a risk of that. So, it would, if you're interested in this, not only is it, it's still kind of hard to find a Fury X for sale, but if you're worried about that sound, it may be something worth kind of waiting a month or two and seeing how the rest of this kind of plays out over the upcoming week. Because trust me, I'm sure I will be inundated with new information from AMD and from resellers and from add-in card vendors and from buyers about what they see and what they don't see. And I am keeping an eye on Newegg and Amazon and Tiger Direct, trying to find more of these to kind of buy and take samples of as we go. It just becomes become a very expensive project, unfortunately, at $649 a piece. So there's that. But
because this is exactly what you need with a. By the way, congratulations on the birth. I just didn't get that out there.
Oh yeah, thank you.
It's very exciting.
The birth of 3 Fury X cards, you mean? Or
no, sorry.
Oh,
Bueller.
Gotcha.
The other birth, the one that was on Twitter.
Yes, my daughter.
Yeah, you know.
She'll have Fury X cards. I'll get her doing this testing in no time. Don't worry about it.
Lining the crib with the warmth of the Fury X cards.
Yeah.
I digress, but this is, because I'll be curious to see, like, does this turn into a card where they get a lot of chargebacks? Are people going to be upset? Again, they went for a premium value that put them competing, with a card they basically hang with, don't beat, over at NVIDIA. And, now it's like, it's a little whiny. I just, and then people are like, oh, I RM'd and I got a card that wasn't as loud. Now people are going to start returning cards, and it just sounds like a big, hot, fat, unpleasant mess. I'm just saying.
So, like I said, I've put in questions to AMD several times about the process, what exactly changed, what exactly people need to look for. And obviously, they kind of would rather this not be brought up anymore, because they still have a lot of cards out there that they need to sell that they'd rather not have to take back into inventory and figure out what to do with. But that's sorry for them. The people that are buying this hardware need to make sure they're getting the right stuff. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll try to get some more cards in here to see how things change.
Ladies and gentlemen, we wait with bated breath. We also wait with bated breath to find out if XFastest, which is a Chinese language hardware enthusiast site, is correct about their, it looks like a classic Intel document that's been leaked. There's a big red X over the standard performance cooler that comes with Intel processors. That's the big fat aluminum biscuit with the copper center, the chewy and delicious copper center. And there'll be a couple of options: the high performance Air SKL-S 130 watt PCG 2015D, or the high performance liquid cooling SKL-S 130 watt PCG 2015D, which hopefully will not whine. Both of which have lovely blue LCDs and are rumored by the XFastest website to be shipping with the HEDT or high-end desktop Skylake K processors, which is pretty cool. It's kind of funny, when you're looking at people doing enthusiast builds, you almost never see them using the standard cooler, either A, because their part didn't come with one, or B, because they immediately hucked it in the nearest garbage can and put on something fancier. But I think. Do
you think that's the case? I'm curious. I wanted to ask what you think about this. So we're a little bit different in kind of what we have access to and what we expect. I would guess that a high percentage of people actually do use the stock cooler on these processors, if only. And I think it's pretty high, but I also would guess that it's a kind of a higher percentage we would think. And even then, some people might say, well, they're only using it temporarily, but I don't think that would necessarily be the case. I just think it's like, if you're not doing high performance stuff, it's just easy, it's convenient. It's not the quietest, it's not the coolest. No, but a lot of people would use them, I think. But I don't, right? And I'm saying that as somebody who I know I don't. So.
Well, okay, so the shot people just saw while you were talking was, the sub $400 gaming PC, and that's the stock Intel cooler, because we were building to a very, very low price point. So, even a $35 or $40 stock cooler, which in many cases will, equal the performance of some of the better liquid cooling options, was not in the cards for this build because it was very price oriented. And I tend to think that people, until they start getting serious about overclocking, are pretty, price conscious. And A, most people don't overclock, so there's not a whole lot of point. B, it's not a bad fan. You know, in the early days, you used to see huge deltas between even the worst of the aftermarket fans and the thing that shipped in the box from, you know, Intel, AMD, CyberMax. There's another company whose name I can't remember anymore that was doing x86 processors. And upgrading to almost anything gave you either a significantly quieter experience or significantly cooler processor. You know, this is not a bad fan. It's not a great fan. If I were overclocking this system, I would probably be wanting to put a better fan on it just to make it less loud. But yeah, I think, you know, the rule of thumb at Dell a long time ago was that less than 10% of the people who bought a machine from Dell on the consumer side, not you know, consumer and enterprise, just on the consumer side of the house, like less than 10% of the people ever opened the case, modified, added, or changed the hardware that shipped from them. And it's probably a pretty safe rule of thumb. You know, yeah, system builders are a minority. System builders that get fancy are probably a minority of that. I think probably in our audience, a lot of the people who are building are going for something a little flashier. I could be wrong. I think it's smart of Intel to offer, you know, given the VIG on these parts, these are not going to be inexpensive parts. And I think putting something that's that much nicer in the box is pretty smart. Plus, it's going to give them people out of the box a pretty good shot at getting a good overclocking experience, which I think is pretty smart. Cool. I don't know. We'll find out. Pardon me. ASUS introduces STRIX GTX 980 Ti with direct copper 3 cooler and a hefty overclock. I'm curious. I mean, this lineup, the DirectCU coolers have done pretty well. Are we looking at a decent performance delta? I think Sebastian Peak wrote this up for PC Bird. Is this a news announcement, or did he get a chance to benchmark it?
This is a news announcement. I'm still waiting for our card to actually show up. So it is just kind of like, hey, let's look at their specs. The card looks massive. Like that shot doesn't really do it justice. If you click on the second picture and make it a little bit bigger, and you kind of zoom in on the PCB some, what you need to look at is how high it extends above the mounting bracket. So if you just kind of zoom in, like where the SLI bridges are at the top there, you'll notice that the board goes significantly higher than that, which is part of their higher phase power design, greater overclocking capability. There's a lot of other features here. The DirectCU III Cooler should be pretty good. The DirectCU II, which is what ASUS has had for a while, has been an excellent cooler, both cool and quiet. But really what makes it stand out for me is they are, so there's going to be two, like a dip switch. You can change between two settings, but the faster of the settings out of the box will run at a base clock of 1216 megahertz, which is 21% faster than the reference card, right? So you're going to get a 21% or so increase in clock speed across the board with this right out of the box. And from what I've been told by ASUS, this is only like a $30 premium over the base price of the 980 Ti as well. So instead of $649, they're telling me the MSRP is $679, and you get this really impressive cooler. You may need to make sure you have a case that can handle the card, because it's taller than normal. So that will be a concern for a couple of people, or a handful of people, if nothing else. But you get this automatic out-of-the-box overclocking capability or overclock that you don't normally see. That's one of my biggest complaints with retail graphics cards, is that they come with all these fancy heat sinks on them, and they have a lot of overclocking headroom, but they just kind of ship them with modest overclocks, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me unless they just have concerns about reliability at certain instances. But we've never run into any of those problems. So I'm looking forward to testing this product. And if it actually sells for $679, that would be a fantastic card for the money, especially when you compare it to the other 980 Ti's out there on the market.
I'll be really curious to see what it does in terms of performance over a 20% overclock versus the stock clock speed.
Oh yeah,
because that just sounds like a huge number to me, a 21% overclock.
If I were to just take a guess based on experience of what that actually means, you're probably talking 12 to 15% of actual real world like frame rate increases, because the memory's overclocked just a little bit as well on the card. So that's going to be my guess. We'll see how that actually pans out.
We should take a moment to thank our friends over at creditkarma.com. What's the most important number in your life? Credit Karma, of course, being a sponsor. It's not your age, it's not your IQ. It has a huge impact on your finances, what you might pay for credit card interest, home loans, auto loans, student debt. It's your credit score, people, and it's crucial to know what that score is and how it works, because understanding your credit is the first step towards building your financial future. Problem is, some people get stuck paying to find out their credit scores, which is why Credit Karma offers free credit scores, reports, and monitoring, along with handy financial tools to help you make sense of your credit in one easy-to-access place. There is a free Credit Karma app. Just text TWiT, T-W-I-T, to 89800. You'll get started right away. Suggestions to help you manage and monitor your credit. You'll be alerted when your credit score changes. Credit Karma has financial tools to help you calculate home affordability, debt repayment, simple loans, and amortization. They also have an archive of articles to help you better understand your credit and build your financial health. And I think Ryan's going to be thinking a lot about Credit Karma in the next few weeks as his little bundle of joy starts to grow larger and he realizes he needs to start saving today should his little bundle of joy get into one of the superior schools out there that will be charging millions of dollars a year in tuition.
I was going to say, if we base that on inflation, tuition should be about 7 figures by then. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Yep, that's why my boys are going to be welders. There are nuclear physicists. They can be whatever they want to be, or artists, as long as they have a job. But seriously, if you're not keeping an eye on your credit score, you probably should be. Because it can really complicate your life. If you don't, find out your credit score today with Credit Karma. Go to creditkarma.com to manage and monitor your credit for free with no credit card required. You hear that? You don't have to give them a credit card to get this information. That's pretty smart. Download the free app and be sure to text TWiT to 89800 to monitor your credit on the go. We want to thank Credit Karma for supporting us here at This Week in Computer Hardware and, of course, the TWiT network in general. So many ways to monitor your credit. I like the idea of just like one simple application with graphical interfaces to make it easy and painless.
Pictures make everything better.
Oh, my goodness. Skylake, which we are kind of in the midst of, sort of.
Getting there.
Getting there. We're hoping is going to be the next big desktop. It's going to be followed up with Kaby Lake, which
I don't know how to pronounce that, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's Kaby. I'm going to need somebody to say it out loud other than me first to figure it out. Kaby Lake?
Well, Scott wrote this up for PCPro.com. It's Kaby Lake Pine Portage Lodge and Kabinakagami Lake, which is the Indian translation of Lake of Many Bays, which is in the Algoma district and the headwaters of the Albany River system. How exciting. Northern Ontario Wilderness Resorts. This just looks delightful.
Right.
Yeah, it's Kabinakagami Lake, which is a really difficult thing for me to say twice.
Yeah.
In any case, we're here to talk about processors. 64-bit multi-core processor, 14-nanometer process. Oh.
No, go ahead.
Uh-oh. And then I realized that there was an update from fairly recently that it has been pointed out, Scott is told, that many hoaxes have come out of the same source. And I should be more clear in my disclaimer. This is an unconfirmed, relatively easy-to-fake leak that does not have a second independent source. I reported on it because, apart from being interesting enough, some details are listed on the images but not highlighted in the leak, such as GT0 and the lack of Iris Pro on Dash K. That suggests that the leaker got the images from somewhere but didn't notice those details, which implies that the original source was hoaxed by an anonymous source who only seeded the hoax to a single media outlet, or that it was an actual leak. So this may or may not be an actual chip that could be coming in the future as a talk for the 14-nanometer redesign between Skylake and Cannon Lake, but could be a complete act of bull fluff.
Yeah, we always say that with these types of stories. The interesting thing about it is...
But Scott said it this time with a big blue box to make it pop.
Correct. We wanted to make that very clear. The interesting thing is that it was a product that hadn't really existed, and it kind of coincides with the rumored speculation about the 10-nanometer process technology being pushed back in time a little bit, it being delayed. And so if that happens for a large enough span, would Intel then take it to themselves to kind of update the Skylake architecture with another architecture in the same process node, which is something they haven't done in recent, since they've introduced the TikTok method of product releases. So it still could be untrue, but it does kind of fit with some of the other things that are happening in the industry, the slowdown in process technology evolution, for example. But otherwise, details of this architecture and the products within could be hit or miss in terms of reliability. But the idea of this kind of the first time breaking the TikTok model from Intel since it started back in Conroe days, I think, would be an interesting change, if nothing else.
We wait with bated breath. It seems to be the theme of today's episode of This Week.
There's a lot of waiting. Yeah.
There's a lot of waiting, which is not our fault. It's the industry. It's evolution. It's time itself and engineering. Lexar Proffesional Workflow HR2, UR1, SR1, CFR1, DD256 review, fully loaded. That just sounds like such an awesome title. And then you look at it, and it's the world's tweeest and most delightful looking card reader. It's actually really cool. I shouldn't be mocking it because I actually really like it. But you look at it, and it looks like a character from a Japanese children's anime. It's a 4-hub device that can accept card readers or other types of devices, USB flash storage, SDCF, CFast cards. CFast cards are pretty sick. So they can deliver over 500 megabytes per second, writes Mr. Alan Malventano on PC Per. 6 inches high, 4 inches wide, 3.3 inches deep. And part of the reason is, I giggle because it's so shiny and it looks like, like I said, like a little Japanese anime robot character. But it's pretty cool in that I have been dealing with a lot of what I will use, I'll use a highly technical term, craptastic, SD card readers and USB connect. It's been interesting because I've been doing, because the more I deal with production, the more I'm dealing with like 3, 4, 5 gigabyte files, moving them around. I've been transferring audio files around. I've been doing some testing and playing around, like, with the speakers. I needed to set up a new device to play some stuff back. And it's been amazing me how unbelievably slow USB 3.0 can be. And then you find it's not really USB 3.0, but it turns out to be a mislabeled USB adapter for an SD card or something like that. And to have a fairly hardcore brand such as Lexar sit down and build something that's designed to be a professional device, to me, is really, really awesome. If you take a look at the pictures on the second page, is like USB 3.0 Type B connectors in the rear of each docking bay. You can pull the adapters out of the dock. You can leave the adapters in place in the dock. The performance looked pretty good to me. The fact that it's got USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt options is really fantastic to me. Although the performance was very, very similar. The edge was certainly on USB 3.0 in some of the tests, which I was kind of surprised. USB 3.0 was running faster on Windows. In terms of Mac, again, the Thunderbolt link was not as fast as the USB 3.0 link, which I was kind of surprised by. So it gets interesting. So there's like a $45 USB 3.0 only model. The HR2, which is, that's the 4-bay version, starts at $195, which sounds like a lot of money unless you've ever actually had an entire project sidelined by the simple fact that it was taking forever to transfer stuff. The modules are not cheap. You're looking for about $110 for a 256 gigabyte drive, $150 for a 512 gigabyte drive. Hint: get the bigger drive. And there's it's a pretty interesting array of adapters, that are running from, $20, $25, $15,
I think
from
this
there.
This is interesting. It's an interesting idea, right? So obviously, like, the difference there in the pricing between the HR1 and the HR2 is substantial. You would almost, unless you don't have USB 3 and you have Thunderbolt instead, like if you're on a Mac, maybe you get the HR2 because you want Thunderbolt for some purpose, but you should go with USB 3. I mean, it's a quarter of the price.
In fact, you're right. The HR1, which is the USB 3.0 only adapter, is $45, which is really cheap. The HR2, which is the Thunderbolt and USB 3.0 adapter, is a biscuit under $200. It's $195.17.
Yeah.
So that's good to point out.
Yeah, and I think like the modularity of it is interesting to me for somebody like, even for you, for example, that maybe is working on stuff in multiple locations, right? At a studio or at the warehouse or at the house, and you have that 512 gig, SSD that plugs in there. If you have one of these docks at home and one at the office, or you don't need the docks, you just take the cable with you. The idea that, it's just pick it up and take it with you and go is pretty nice, right? Obviously, there's other options to do that, but none of them that are kind of as cleanly installable as this. And you can have multiple of them. You could fill all 4 of these ports on the HR1 with SSDs if you wanted, and have one for one line of shows, one for another line of shows, and then one for personal stuff, and kind of take it with you as you need it. Which is it's neat.
Yeah. No, I think it's smart. And yeah, having dealt with a whole bunch of USB 3.0 adapters that delivered miserable read-or-write speeds, which may be an issue more with the memory than the actual adapter itself, but in some cases the adapter was the problem. I think it's got potential. It has potential.
Agree.
Oh my goodness. If you want to hear me talk about the pain and suffering of 3D printing and you might just want to have somebody else print for you, and there's a whole bunch of places you can do that. You should check out Tech Thing this week. We talk a bit about iPhone 6 rumors. Shannon's got some really cool Android hacks and tricks, including some software that makes it super easy to find deleted files, even your bookmarks and photos on your Android phone. We got that coming up on Tech Thing. I suspect there will be product testing on PCPro.com.
There will be. I'm working on now a three-way crossfire of Fury X versus three-way SLI of 980 Ti story. So I'm trying to get the last bits of testing on the 980 Ti's for that today. And then we still have some G-Sync laptops that we need to get to, as well as some other laptops like the LaVZ from Lenovo that we're trying to get through as well. And then we are, like I said, waiting on that ASUS STRIX 980 Ti to come in the next day or two as well. So, yeah.
There you have it, ladies and
gentlemen. Never stops.
That's a good thing. If it stops, we're all out of work, people.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
With that, we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of This Week in Computer Hardware. You can find all of our episodes at twit.com/TWiCH. We may be having an all-viewer question episode next week. We've been a little slacking on the viewer questions. We will fix that next week. I promise you. I assure you. And just to help us do that, do us a favor. Tweets at Patrick Norton or at Ryan Shrouts. Or you can use the emails, which I love so much, to Twitch at twit.tv is our email address. And with that, you can find more of me at techthing.com or youtube.com/techthing. You can find Mr. Shrout at pcper.com. And thank you all so much for watching this episode of Twitch. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week.